Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rob's Funk and Junk podcast, episode number 20. I made it to 20. Sorry I wasn't here last week. I had a week off. Well, not a week off, just busy. Not making excuses, just busy gigs, sessions, bits and bobs, life and stuff. How are you all out there today? The weather's still absolutely crap here. I've just come back. Actually, what time is it? It is 20 to 3. I'm only just getting started on work at 20 to 3 because I had a workout thing this morning at the gym. I will have the body of an Adonis at some point, but not now. Man, it killed me today. Yeah, it just goes to show too many late nights, and it really plays havoc on your ability to do exercise successfully. I'm just going to turn my mic up a little bit. I did notice last podcast that my mic was distorting, so sorry about that. Apologies. I got my levels all wrong. But yeah, I had a workout, and I've just been out walking the dogs. Separate walks today, getting my 10,000 steps in, so I can live a long and healthy life, hopefully. Yeah, got to start taking care of myself a bit more, as we all do when we get to the age that we are. Yes. Yeah, so how is everyone out there? I hope you're all well, safe, and getting on with your musical endeavours, or just your life, if you're not a musician, or listening to music and enjoying it. I actually just listened to a great podcast, by the way. There's a podcast called Riff Raff. If anyone's out there in the mood to listen to some really good guitar chat, let me just check. I want to say his name correctly, but he's an amazing player. A guy called Shane Theriot, I think it's Theriot. Shane Theriot, who is the guitar player MD for Hall & Oates, but he has done. He's got this podcast that I've actually listened to for quite some time now, actually, called Riff Raff, and he does some great interviews. I don't think he does podcasts regularly. I think he sort of puts them out every couple of months, or maybe just whenever he feels like doing it, which I think is cool as well. He's a busy chap, and I know what that's like when you're. I'm learning what that's like. Sometimes you can't always get the time to sit down, or the headspace to sit down and talk to yourself for half an hour or 40 minutes. But he always has guests on, and that, I know, is something I would like to do in the future, but it seems to be quite difficult to schedule things. So, but he just had a really good chat. The one I just listened to was a really good chat with, it was all about YouTube guitar players. So he had on his podcast, he was talking to, hang on, let me just have a look at the episode. He's talking to RJ Ronquillo, if I'm saying his name correctly, who's an amazing player. And he does a lot of sort of pedal demos and gear demos on his YouTube channel. He's got a very successful YouTube channel. And he's also talking to Jeff McElhaine. Is that how I pronounce his name? Jeff McElhaine. Yeah. God, I can't speak today. But yeah, they're just talking about the journey from being touring and playing guitar players, and then sort of talking about the journey into becoming YouTubers, which is, it's a huge thing these days. I remember the last time I went to the NAMM show, which was probably 2 years before the old pandemic. I noticed that YouTubers were there were hordes of people following YouTubers around, and then there were, I was standing there, and Omar Hakim and Daryl Jones walked past me, and no one batted an eyelid. And it was almost like people didn't even know who they were. I think it's something to do with the visuality of YouTube. It's quite an accessible thing. You don't have to go to a gig. You can sit at home or sit and watch it on your phone when you're, you know, waiting for a bus or whatever you're doing, or you know, yeah, it's so they're talking about the journey into YouTubers and being a YouTuber and an online guitarist, of which there are a lot. And then that kind of made me think, well, basically all three of them are, you know, they are gigging, touring musicians, or were touring musicians. I think RJ Ronquillo played with Ricky Martin and a few other artists. And then I think Jeff McElwain is an artist in his own right, released his own records, and they just kind of fell into it. Anyway, I'm telling you what's on their podcast, and it's really good to listen to. That kind of thing. It's sort of inspiring and also quite educational about what it takes to do all that stuff and how difficult it is actually doing a YouTube video. I've done it. God, man, it's hard work. To sit there and talk on video, well, yeah, it's quite hard work, and you know, running the cameras, getting the lighting right. Some days you lose a whole day because you're just not. By the time you've fucked up 15,000 times, you really aren't in the mood to play or talk. And then you watch back what you've just recorded, and you look like you're in a really bad mood. I used to do that. I did a few myself, and yeah, just getting into the habit of talking on video to yourself all day long and making mistakes and ums and ahs, and you hear yourself back and you realise you sound like a doofus. Did I just say doofus? I'm not in a 80s American film. But yeah, it's not easy to do, and I'm sure you get into it. But these guys are very, very, very good at it, and they seemingly do really well from it. I'm not sure I could do it like that. When I was trying to do it, I only did it for, you know, on and off for a year, and I found it quite, for me, it just wasn't what I wanted to get into at that time. Maybe I will down the line. I am thinking of doing a little tuition course, a video tuition course. So, but yeah, that's quite hard to get your head round. I'm thinking about it and how I would do it and what sort of subjects. But if anyone's got any ideas things they'd like me to talk about on an online video course, I kind of think I'd probably go from the approach of playing funk stuff. Or maybe I'd do a couple of courses, one on funk guitar, one on studio guitar, like home recording, studio stuff, how I approach that, because I do a hell of a lot of that, so I do feel like I know quite a bit about it, although I'm always still learning. But yeah, if anyone's got anything that they'd like to see or hear me talk about or teach, yeah, that might get me cracking. Yeah, send me an email at Rob Harris. No, not Rob Harris. That's my other one. robsfunkandjunk@gmail.com. And I might get to it. I have been doing quite a bit of writing lately, so as well. So I could perhaps use a couple of tracks that I'm working on here, because that's a problem when you're doing a recording course. You can't use someone else's tracks that you're doing a session for, so you have to sort of create your own thing. But I'll figure it out. What else has been happening? I just had a lovely couple of days away in the south of France. I got back last night. I did a clinic for PRS at an amazing shop called Brock Music in Nîmes in the south of France. And man, this place was an absolute treasure trove. It was like heaven. More guitars than you can imagine. Pedals, a wall of pedals, like new and second hand, and amps everywhere, and like a load of sort of old gear. There was some old gear that I sort of was just browsing around the shop. You could spend days in there and never see everything. But I was just browsing around the shop and come across some old gear that I used to have, when I was a kid. I saw the old Intelifex the Rocktron Intelifex, which I kind of coveted and saved for months and months to get hold of one. Which back in the old rack mount days, the old when everyone had a huge fridge style rack mount thing that they carried around to their little pub gigs. Oh God, it was ridiculous. Oh man, I used to turn up to a pub gig with a Marshall, two Marshall 2x12s, like the miniature sort of the miniature Marshall cab, the smaller ones. Two of those, a rack that was probably about a 10U rack, and I had an H&H power amp in it, and a Boogie preamp, a Boogie Studio preamp, Mesa Boogie Studio preamp, and I also had an Intelifex and a Quadraverb and a foot switch and a guitar, and I'd be turning up to do gigs for 50 quid in a little pub in Acton every Friday night. Imagining I was playing at the Baked Potato in LA, whilst churning out Mustang Sally to the drunken and inebriated. But yeah, it was a nice little walk down memory lane the other day at this guitar store, just seeing all the old gear, and I remember buying that Intelifex. It cost me a fortune, or they cost a fortune back in the day. And then, I stopped using it, stopped using the racks, went back to using pedals. And then I tried to sell it. Would anyone buy it? No one wanted it. It became one of those things that, just was absolutely useless to anybody after a certain time, because, the sound changed and no one wanted them, or new bits of kit come out. But that's what they were talking about with the on this podcast, is the amount of pedals that come out. It's a never-ending stream of new pedals that are coming out all the time. Overdrive pedals, this is the new thing. I've got to get the new thing, and I've been using the same ones. I've got 3. If I'm looking down at my board now, I have 3 overdrive pedals. I've got the Vemurum Shanks ODS one, it is, which is brilliant, which is like a version of, this is on my main large pedal board, which I've got to actually do some work on soon. It's the remake of the it's like a newer version of the Noble's ODR1, which I still also use all the time, but that's on another little pedal board. I have the Gladio Cornerstone, which is brilliant, but although I haven't used it loads, it's good, but I haven't used it loads. And then for much heavier stuff, I've got the Friedman, what's it called? BEOD Deluxe, which is a bit more of a Marshall-y thing. Yeah, if I can't get the sounds I need out of those 3, I must be doing something wrong. But I don't change them a lot. But yeah, that's what they were saying. Because RJ is a pedal demonstrator. He just gets pedal after pedal after pedal after pedal. And I can imagine it must be, I'm sure he either gives them away or sells them or whatever afterwards. But yeah, I've got a cupboard at the back of my room full of pedals that I never even look at, I know it's a habit that people get into, but yeah, I seem to have stopped that these days. And I, as I sort of have mentioned many times in the past, I tend to take out on gigs these days, especially, the gigs I'm doing, most of the time I'm turning up and they just give me 2 XLRs and they come out the back of my Quad Cortex, and I'm either using in-ears or I've got my FRs, and that means I can get the tones I want at the low volumes that the club requires, rather than having a raging amp behind me. But yeah, anyway, but that's it's a really good podcast. I really recommend you check it out. It's called Riff Raff by Shane Theriault. He's brilliant. I sounded like a radio DJ there. My radio voice. Going back to the weekend, I had a really, really good time working, sort of playing some PRS guitars, and there was a really good demonstrator called Silvestre. I'm really struggling with name pronunciation today. Don't know what's going on. Um, but yeah, I had a really good time walking around a guitar shop. Then I played a couple of tunes, and then went out for a really nice dinner with the shop owner Thomas and his wife. Um, and we were in a bar next door, bit of a rock bar. And one of their friends was a winemaker, so there were just plenty of bottles of wine. As soon as one was empty, another one was there. So I ended up getting to bed about sort of 2:30, 3, and then oh man, going there, fuck me, going there. The night before I left, I had PRS had kindly got me a hotel the night before at Gatwick Airport. So I turn up probably about 9 o'clock at night, because I had to be up at 4 a.m. the next day. And I check in the hotel, go to bed, try and get to sleep. I'm struggling to sleep. Eventually probably got off to sleep about 10:30. 2 a.m., the fire alarm goes off in the hotel. So I'm completely, lost as to what's going on. I'm looking, because I got a new iPhone. I picked up my phone going, God, that alarm's loud. I thought I'd set my alarm for the wrong time. And I was like, then I was like sort of wandering around the room. I picked up the hotel phone thinking I'd booked an alarm call for the wrong time. And it turned out it was the fire alarm. So all of the hotel is now sort of gangling down the stairs. I'm freezing cold because I didn't grab any jumper or anything. I just was in jeans and a t-shirt. And we stood outside the hotel for about an hour at 2 a.m. So 2 till 3. And what it was, some absolute bellend had been vaping in their room. And obviously overdid it and set the fucking fire alarms off. Thank you, whoever that was. If you are a guitar player and you're listening to this and you know it was you, he or she, or them, or whatever the correct pronoun is for you, thanks for that. So I ended up getting back to sleep about 3:30, and then my alarm went off at 4. So I was absolutely knackered. And then really long day the next day. Yeah, same sort of thing. Went to bed. Hence why this morning's gym workout was really, really hard work. But it was enjoyable. I feel much better now for doing it. I have got, I'm going to try this out. While I'm here, I was thinking of this new little feature that I'm going to try and do. And if anyone's got any funk, basically what it is, I'm going to call it Funk and Junk after the website. So I'm going to talk about something funk, which is, funk is going to be the word for a good thing that's happened this week, a nice thing. And then there's going to be junk for something that's just got on my nerves. So I'm not ranting for too long. So this week's junk, I'm going to start with junk. And I thought of this the other day when I was out walking with my AirPods in, listening to an interview podcast. And this week's junk, I'm starting with junk, is the word like. The way people use the word like. I listened to this interview the other day, and I might do it, actually. I might do it all the time. I don't know. But I listened to this interview the other day with a certain artist that I really love. I really love his music, and man, this guy said like a lot. It was like, I nearly did it myself. It was nearly every other word. It was kind of, hey man, and then I'm like, and then we were like, and then like, when I just think about it, like, and then, I like. He never actually used the word like in the way that it was supposed to be, like by saying I like that guitar part, or he used it. I mean, I couldn't even count up. I had to stop listening to it because it was driving me up the wall. So that's my first junk for the week, and then I'm going to do funk. So funk for the week my funk for the week is actually, I'm going to say it was just being with some nice people the other day in the south of France. Really, really friendly people, having some nice chats about guitar and about the guitar industry and how healthy the guitar sale industry is, and talking to someone who absolutely was completely passionate. This guy, Thomas, I'm not sure of his surname actually, but Thomas, he runs the Brock Music Place. That's the funk. So the funk for the week is talking to nice people about guitars. And the junk for the week is people who say like when they should be saying something else. It's become a replacement for or ah. And I say a lot because I listen to my podcast back sometimes to check the audio quality. So I do say a lot and get on my own nerves. But anyway, if anyone's got any funk or junk that they'd like to send in, and the other thing I'm thinking of doing is I'm thinking of actually getting some funk and junk T-shirts made. If anyone would be interested in those, you know, just to spread the word, basically. I do really appreciate people listening into this podcast, and I like sort of getting the emails. People send in some nice things. Thankfully, they're not sending in horrible things saying that I'm a dickhead and I don't know what I'm talking about. But it is nice. I do enjoy doing this, and I'm glad when people say that likewise that they're enjoying it. I have had a couple of emails. Oh, the other news that I have talked about this before. I've mentioned it already, but I had a meeting with Paul last week. We have got a venue and some dates. I'm not going to release them just yet. Paul and I set up a thing a few years ago called Boom and Twang, where we were sort of, this is kind of almost before the huge sort of resurgence of the YouTube sort of lesson thing happened. We had the idea that we were going to do some online courses, and Paul and I quite often do masterclasses anyway. So we've thought about doing our own weekends here in the UK. I have mentioned it before. So we now have some dates. So if anyone is interested, drop me a line. But we're going to be doing joint bass and guitar weekends here in the UK. Yeah, I'm going to release the dates probably next week, just because I'm waiting for something else to clear first, just to be absolutely certain. But it's going to be a great weekend. Going to be a handful of students, handful of guitar players, handful of bass players, and we're going to be doing some joint classes, some one-to-one classes, and then some joint workshops where we're going to have a visiting celebrity drummer, where everyone can get up and have a play, and kind of work on the idea of how important ensemble playing is and how to play it as part of a group. So that's what we're doing. But if anyone's interested, drop me a line. What else have I got? So I have got a couple of emails here that I'm going to read out. Thank you for sending them in. Remember, if anyone else has got any, drop me a line on robsfunkandjunk@gmail.com. So here we go. So I've got one from Michael Gibson. Good name, Michael. Nice. It's like Jimmy Fender. Right, so what have I got? Did I read this out last time? I don't know. Hi, Rob. Big fan of the podcast. Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks. Really enjoy listening to them on car rides and hearing you natter on about music and general life. I mean that in a good way. Don't worry. It really feels down to earth. So thanks for continuing to upload. It always cheers me up. Oh, that's great. Thanks, man. I was wondering, how do you set your amps up for playing live, especially with bands like Jamiroquai? Do you prefer your amps to be pristine clean, think eye-popping transients, or high headroom, or just on the verge of amp breakup? I know you would use studio compression when tracking DI, but how do you manage clean tones with real amps live? Also, how does your approach to live guitar tone differ when using modelers such as the Quad Cortex compared to the real thing? Hope all is well. Wishing you all the best from Scotland. Thanks for that, Michael. So with Jamiroquai, I always used to... because we never play that loud. So the amps that I used to use when I started were much louder, sort of 50-watt amps. I was using these Hughes and Kettners, so I could play quite loud back then. And then I swapped over to using a Fender Twin for my clean sounds. I used to switch between amps, so I had a Fender for clean and my old Marshall for lead tones. So I used to sort of A/B the amps. Then I swapped over to using two Mesa Boogie Lone Stars, which I think were set to 50 watts and then eventually set down to 25 watts because Jay doesn't like a lot of volume on stage. He can't take things being too loud. I'll get to the point of this in a minute. Then I swapped over to using my divided by 13 JRT 15, which is it's a 915 amp, so it's got 9 watts in one mode and then 15 watts in another mode, I believe. Forgive me if I'm wrong with that. But what happened over the years is the band got quieter and quieter on stage. So I was using valve amps with much lower wattage ratings, which meant that the breakup of those amps would be sooner. They would be sooner, rather than having a Fender Twin, which has got quite a high headroom for before it starts to break up. So I did typically go for as clean a headroom as I could get. If I'm ever going to do a gig where I must use a higher amp, which is much less and less these days because I now use modelers for gigging, I used to always spec on the higher amp a Fender DeVille, the 2x12 Fender DeVille amps, which seem to be most consistent. Most, actually a lot of the time in the rental gear would be, you'd always order two because one of them wouldn't work. I have had it where I've ordered two and both of them didn't work, and then had to get a third one along. But they tended to have quite a high headroom as well. So when I was playing with Sister Sledge, I'd always spec a Fender DeVille amp, the 2x12 one. Now, that's because I was playing very clean sort of funk parts for those tracks, and I wanted pristine clean. I don't mind a little bit of breakup, but I don't want too much of it. I don't mind. I can always pop the volume back on the guitar slightly, but yeah, I really don't mind a little bit of breakup happening. And with modelers now, you can dial that in. You can really dial. You can be so precise with what you want your tone to be. I think that's why they're so good. They're getting so good for gigs, like larger volume, larger venues. They're perfect for that, I think. I've spoken about this a lot before, but I can, one of my models that I use on my one of my rigs that I use in my Quad Cortex, I'm using a capture of my divided by 13 FTR 37, and I set that clean when I captured it, so it's just on the edge of breakup. So if I push really hard on the guitar, say I use a 335 and I really push hard, it will break up slightly. Perhaps less so with a Strat, but then I can model it a little bit hotter if I want to. But for the stuff that I'm doing, especially for the last Jamiroquai tour, I needed some really pristine, clean sounds. So I would use a model of a Michael Britt capture of a divided by 13 amp. I particularly like those amps. So, and I have them, and I did A/B them between mine and the real the real thing and the capture in my studio through my studio monitors, and you're splitting hairs to tell the difference. So yeah, that's how I set it. As I said, when you've said how does your approach to the live guitar tone differ when using modelers such as the Quad Cortex? It is. I just think it's for where I'm at in my head these days with my life and gigging and touring and stuff like that. I think it's a brilliant way to do gigs. You can do so much more. You can do so much more with the modeler, like switching wise. You know, I can imagine taking a huge pedal board around, and it is great, but there's so much more that can go wrong. And for the amount of the gigs that I'm doing these days, the modeler absolutely ticks every box that I need it to for the gigs that I'm doing. If I'm playing down the pub, which is very, very rare these days, I'm usually out doing another gig, I would take my Deluxe or my Princeton and, or something a little bit louder, and my pedal board. But because I'm having to switch from sound to sound, and, you can do all the kind of soundscapey stuff, which sounds incredible on your in-ears and really does translate out the front. I listened to live stuff, the live shows that we did. We'd always have a recording of the Jamiroquai shows. And I was always really pleasantly surprised at how the guitar cut through the mix with the Kemper that I was using. It sounded fine. And I remember going to see other shows where there'd be a guitarist that had a huge rig, massive rig, pedals everywhere, amps off stage, mic'd up, and his tone was shit. Terrible. And then there was the backup keyboard player who was using a Kemper, and he sounded great, and it wasn't about the playing, it was just about the sound. 1 second, my dog wants to go out for a pee, but I hope that answers your question. I'll be right back. Pee time done. Sorry about that. So where was I? So I've got another email from my good friend John Stathopoulos. Hey John, how you doing, man? Nice to hear from you again. He says, "Hi Rob." Actually, it's great. John always sends great questions in. Hi Rob, on the algorithm thing, I generally agree that having an algorithm decide who sees and listens is a tragic sign of our times. However, I also believe that we are lucky to have a medium like Instagram to keep us close to artists we like and live the experience of immediate communication with them. End of that. A question. Have you ever found inspiration from something other than music that you managed to channel to your playing music / music? I have read stories of musicians being inspired by paintings or books and channeling it into writing music. It seems strange to me, but I'm not much of a composer nowadays, just studying and playing music. Well, yeah, I do. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, it's weird. It's like I get it from a feeling point of view. I think of the feeling of things. So yeah, what I mean by that is the emotions of things. So if I'm watching a film or reading something in a book or just having a conversation with someone, I'm really into this thing of music being a conversation thing. That's how I approach coming out. I mean, when you say composing or inspiration, that's how I approach I try to make my approach to playing on other people's music is I'm trying to complement what it is they're doing. So I'm trying to play sympathetically to what their song is. So yeah, I do take inspiration from that, but then I get that inspiration by watching a lot of things. I might hear some music on a film and love the sort of atmosphere of it and try and sort of be inspired by that when I'm doing something on my own, or the excitement of a part, or the sort of harsh, abandon of a part, something that, I do quite like throwing things in that don't necessarily fit purposely to make the thing feel a certain way. So yeah, I do take inspiration all the time from things. It's quite a hard question to answer, actually. I don't know whether I've answered that correctly, but yeah. And then without sounding too like a hippie, yeah, just going out and walking in the countryside. I take in all that stuff. I know that my taste in music is very song-based. So even when I'm writing an instrumental piece, which I've been working on some things lately, I like to have melodies. I like to hear melodies. I listen to some other things. I listen to some, I kind of listen to a few things that come out with some players that are out there at the moment. And whilst I am absolutely blown away by the ability of the playing, I can't listen to it more than once because there's no song there. Whereas when I listen to something like Jeff Beck, there's always a melody, even if it's like a grotesque sort of ugly sounding thing, at least there's an intention and a melody. I mean, talking about some of their, there's that song Scatterbrain, which I absolutely love. When I say grotesque, I mean that in a good way. I mean, it's purposely a melody, a melodic thing. It's a song. It's not just a demonstration of how amazing someone is on a guitar. And please, before anyone writes in and starts having a go, I love guitar players. I think there are some amazing things. I just think for my amazing artists, I just think for me, I like to hear a song, a form, something that I can kind of sing along with and get the emotion of the melody. But that's just me. I don't want to offend anyone by saying that. We all like what we like, and I'm not, picking out any particular guitar player. That's why I like people like Robben Ford. He's very melodic. His playing is very melodic. His phrasing. Larry Carlton, same thing. Steve Lukather, incredible. John Scofield, same thing. Even his solos are melodic, really sort of song-based. And I take inspiration from those things. I think I like the sound of the older stuff a bit more. It's just my personal taste. My record collection at the moment, I'm listening to things like Neil Young and listening to old Randy Crawford records and like The Dude by Quincy Jones. That's what I'm into. I like that kind of thing. So I take inspiration from those kinds of, especially music-wise, that kind of thing. I like how things used to sound and feel. I always prefer to hear people playing, I prefer the interaction of a couple of people playing in a room. I think it just feels better to me. Anyway, ranted long enough. Where am I at now? 39 minutes. I'm going to close this off before I get to 40 minutes. Thanks for listening, everyone. It really means a lot to me. And I will try and get back next week. I've got a Trionic gig coming up next week. If anyone wants to come down and see us at the Pizza Express in Soho on the 14th of March, myself, Ivan and Paul have a Trionic show coming up. It's selling pretty well, but, we can always fill it out. Please come on down and listen to some good music. But yeah, thanks for listening. Once again, if you've got any questions, drop them in to robsfunkandjunk@gmail.com. Take care and have a good week. Bye.